Are you a fan of technology news? Then the Tech Meme Ride Home is a must subscribe. For 15 years, TechMeme.com has been the website Silicon Valley checks every day for the latest news. And now, every day at 5 p.m., there's a 15-minute podcast that breaks down the latest news in tech, the coolest gadgets, the latest apps, the biggest funding raises, the most recent social media scandals. The Tech Meme Ride Home is like NPR's Marketplace, but for tech news. A daily, easy-to-understand summation of the latest in the world of technology. Open up your podcast app right now and search Ride Home. Then subscribe and listen to the Tech Meme Ride Home podcast. Again, search your podcast app for Ride Home and subscribe to the Tech Meme Ride Home.
Good evening. We begin tonight with breaking news about the long-awaited Inspector General's report into the conduct of then FBI Director James Comey, among others, during the 2016 investigation into Hillary Clinton's private email server. Now, we're going to spend a good amount of time on it tonight, and as you might imagine, it's already being seen through different partisan lenses. Hillary Clinton supporters say that James Comey's decisions cost her the White House. President Trump and his supporters say Director Comey was running an FBI that was biased against him. So before we get to any of that, we want to just try and clear away the smoke and just focus on the key takeaways from the 568-page report. Now, the first, the Inspector General found that Director Comey deviated from Bureau norms in his July 2016 press conference about the case and in his letter to Congress, reopening the case just days before the election. Investigators uncovered another text exchange between the FBI's Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, who was fired last year from Robert Mueller's team. In it, Page asked Strzok whether Donald Trump would become president, and Strzok replies, quote, no, he's not. We'll stop it. The Inspector General also writes that he did not have confidence that Strzok was free from bias when he prioritized the Russia investigation over the Anthony Weiner emails, which, as you know, Director Comey revealed in the closing days of the campaign. Overall, though, the Inspector General report found there was no conspiracy against President Trump in the campaign or in the 2016 Clinton investigation, but it detailed a sequence of events that created the ingredients for a conspiracy or the appearance of impropriety, including those biased text messages. And as to James Comey, the report concludes that even though he was facing difficult decisions in the middle of a presidential election, he made the wrong choices, not because he was biased or crooked, the IG says. He just got it wrong. CNN's Jim Acosta joins us now. Explain what White House reaction so far has been to the report.
Well, Anderson, we heard from the White House press secretary, Sarah Sanders, earlier today. She said that this report essentially confirms the president's belief that there were biases inside the investigation. Of course, we've been reporting, and the IG report says there was no political bias in the investigation, although it did say, obviously, what you were just referring to there a few moments ago, that these FBI agents who were exchanging these anti-Trump texts probably crossed the line and will probably be disciplined. Although that one FBI lawyer, we should point out, Lisa Page, has already left the Bureau.
You mentioned Sarah Sanders encouraging people to tune into FBI Director Christopher Wray's press conference, which happened late today. Just talk a little bit about what Wray said, because he was very, he was, kind of was a full-throated defense of the FBI, but also saying they accepted the IG report.
Yeah, it was interesting, Anderson. He was asked at one point if he could give a one-word reaction to the report, what would it be? And he said disappointed. And so obviously the FBI director who was picked by President Trump is disappointed in the outcome of this investigation and what the investigation found. But it was interesting, Anderson, towards the end of this press conference with the FBI director, who we don't see in front of the cameras very often, he was asked to comment on the president's tweets and his opinions on this investigation. And Christopher Wray said, well, I only want to comment on opinions that I care about. It sounded like a dig somewhat at the president, though it may have just been the FBI director's attempts to really sidestep the issue, tiptoe around the issue. He obviously did not want to talk about the president's opinion on all of this. And, of course, we're waiting for the president to weigh in on all of this. He has not tweeted on this yet. It is his birthday, so perhaps he's waiting until the day after his birthday to weigh in.
No, Jim Acosta, appreciate it. As a reminder, it was only days before the 2016 presidential election that then FBI Director Comey disclosed the agency was reopening an investigation to Hillary Clinton's private email server. Now, many Democrats see Comey's actions as fatally damaging to the Clinton campaign, where Robbie Mook was the campaign manager. He joins us now. So, Robbie, first of all, let's dispense with this right away. The IG report says that at times Comey himself used his personal email for government business, a Gmail account. Comey said there was nothing classified. I know Clinton supporters point to this as hypocrisy, but just because Comey used a personal email, does that make it right?
No, and Hillary said on the campaign trail it was a mistake to have the personal email server. I think what's just in retrospect incredibly ironic and deeply frustrating to a lot of us is that Director Comey felt entitled to go in front of the country unauthorized and lecture Secretary Clinton about her use when it turns out he was doing the same thing. But, at this point, I don't think it's something we should spend a lot of time dwelling on. I just think it speaks to the larger issue here about Comey's judgment that he never should have done this in the first place.
Well, let's talk about the larger issue. I mean, the Inspector General blasted Comey's handling of the case. He said that they found, quote, no evidence that Comey's July statement tearing into Clinton's email habits as extremely careless was the result of bias or an effort to influence the election. Do you accept that Comey wasn't biased or trying to tip the scales?
I do. I think Comey is a patriotic person. I would like to give him the benefit of the doubt and believe that he was doing what at the time he thought was right. But it was a mistake. And I think his belief that there was an exception to the rule really proved the rule. These protocols are in place to prevent the FBI from inadvertently or advertently influencing an election. And I think this is a case where he did influence the election. And frankly, I wish he would be more candid. I think he believes it was a mistake, too. I really do. And this report is helpful in that, the information is out there, and I hope that it gives the professional men and women at the FBI a chance to reflect on why this really should never happen again.
What do you make of the new text messages that were revealed? I mean, the IG investigation is looking at Peter Strzok's emails, text messages with Lisa Page, and also 3 other FBI employees that, according to the Inspector General, included statements of hostility toward candidate Trump and statements of support for candidate Clinton. Don't President Trump supporters have reason to be suspicious and angry, certainly, about that particular text exchange?
Well, they were certainly inappropriate statements. And I think that this report is an important moment for the FBI. It's probably a good gut check for all of them that the things they say matter, the correspondence they have matters. Their institution is incredibly powerful, but that also means that they're held to an incredibly high standard. And the other thing that was in that report is how much people were leaking constantly about the investigation into Secretary Clinton. And you even see in the messages there an acknowledgement by the staff that the leaks that they are putting out, the information that they're shuffling around could have a real impact on the election. And so I think this is a really important cautionary story to everybody working at the FBI. They just have to follow the line. And there are examples here up and down the chain where that just didn't happen.
Robbie, just stand by. I'm going to talk a little bit to Republican Congressman Chris Stewart, and then I'll bring you back in. We'll all discuss this. Congressman Stewart is a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks for being with us. So the IG's report said that they quote, found no evidence that the conclusions by department prosecutors were affected by bias or other improper considerations. For you, does this report put to bed any belief or concerns there may have been about the FBI's investigation to Hillary Clinton?
Well, some of it, I guess, but it's hard to read some of, as you were just indicating, Anderson, it's hard to read some of the texts that were exchanged between some of these FBI officials and not realize there's enormous political animus taking place there. And whether it affected their judgment, whether it affected the actual outcome of their investigation, the IG said that it didn't, still makes many of us uncomfortable. I do want to say first, thanks to the IG for it seems to be a very thorough work. I think the FBI director, Mr. Wray, said it right. It leaves many of us disappointed. Loretta Lynch was faulted for her leadership, and Director Comey, as you were just discussing, finding out he's using a personal email while criticizing and investigating Hillary Clinton for doing the same, and the leaks. And, I mean, no one in this turns out looking very good at the end of the day.
It was interesting. I mean, though they said no bias was found, that in the one case with that Peter Strzok text, in the one case in Peter Strzok's decision to prioritize the Russia investigation over looking more into Anthony Weiner's emails until later, that they could not determine whether or not there was bias in that decision.
Yeah, I think it's really important to note that there's clearly bias in their political views. I mean, there's just no question about that, and very emotional bias. But the Inspector General said that that wasn't reflected in the outcome of the investigation or in their conclusions. Once again, I don't dispute that, but it does make, I think, most Americans uncomfortable to look at senior FBI officials who have such strong emotional political views against one candidate, knowing that they are investigating at the time, although for different reasons, both of these candidates. It doesn't make the FBI senior leadership, it does not cast them in a very positive light.
The Inspector General does say that the rationale that Director Comey used not to prosecute Hillary Clinton, that her handling of classified information wasn't so gross as to almost suggest deliberate intention, which is the standard, was the same rationale that the FBI used in 2008 when they decided not to charge former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales with mishandling classified documents. So if that was an okay standard in 2008, do you believe it was okay to use that standard vis-a-vis Hillary Clinton?
Yeah. You know, I've never disputed the conclusion that the director came to. I think most of us dispute and have trouble with how he publicly presented it. And the Inspector General did as well. He called him actually insubordinate for that, because he did it so that he wouldn't convey that decision onto his boss, the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, who may have had input and may have had a different opinion on that. And by the way, it was ultimately her decision whether to prosecute or not the FBI's. So I don't necessarily disagree with his conclusion whether it was prosecutable or not. It was the very public way that he presented that decision that many people have a real problem with.
I want to bring Robbie Mook back into the discussion. It is interesting, Robbie, today we've heard from Democrats and Republicans that both sides sort of see different things in this, or there's enough in this report that both sides have valid points and raise valid arguments.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but let's be clear about something. I did not hear a single Republican speaking out against Director Comey until the president chose to fire him. And I want to be very clear from my standpoint, the finding in this report was absolutely should not be something that President Trump tries to hide behind as an excuse for why he fired Director Comey. He fired Director Comey because he wanted to stop the Russia investigation, not because he felt sympathy for Hillary Clinton. This is the same campaign that was leading chance of lock her up during the campaign. So I worry there's a false equivalency developing where an opinion that I and other people who were working with Secretary Clinton have held consistently, and the president who suddenly decided he didn't like Director Comey when he was the one facing heat for the potential relationship his campaign had with Russia.
I have to counter that just very quickly, and that is there were some Republicans who were critical of Director Comey before he was fired, and frankly, I was one of them. Beginning in the fall of the election, I was fairly public, although gentle, if you will, in my criticism of some of the things that we were seeing from the director in the Intelligence Committee and some of his testimony before the committee. And it wasn't directly related to Secretary Clinton in the email investigation, but there were other things that we were becoming very uncomfortable with, and we were fairly open about that.
Congressman, do you agree at all with Robbie's argument that James Comey did far more damage to Hillary Clinton, costing her the election, than it ever did to President Trump?
I can understand why he would believe that. I think it's impossible to know. I mean, it truly is actually impossible to know.
Is there tangible damage to President Trump that Comey's investigation into Hillary Clinton did?
No. Look, again, I understand why he would say that. But whether you could conclude that that's why she lost the election, and it's fair, by the way, to point out that at the end of the day, she is responsible for that. She is the one who decided to use this email server. She's the one who hid it. She's the one who destroyed 30,000 of her emails that should have been saved and protected. I mean, there's a number of things that she did that led us to this point. Now, once again, I know that there's criticism the way that the FBI director handled that. There's no question it had some impact on the election. But I don't think anyone conclude that Donald Trump is a president because of that. I think there's many, many more explanations and reasons for that.
Robbie, I want you to be able to respond to that.
Yeah, look, I've been pretty clear in the past. I don't think it is possible to scientifically quantify the impact. And from my standpoint, I don't think that's a productive discussion. I think the fact of the matter here is that the director of the FBI made a very bad judgment. I wish he would own up to that so that so that future directors can learn this lesson. I think this report has a lot for everybody at the FBI to think about. But what I don't want to come out of this is that this somehow becomes a shield for President Trump to obstruct an investigation that, by the way, the FBI was doing at the same time. We never heard leaks about it. We did hear a lot of leaks about Hillary Clinton. And so I don't want this false narrative that Democrats say one thing, Republicans say another. We've been saying for months and years even that the FBI was mishandling this. But that is no excuse for Donald Trump to turn around today and say that the people have no right to get to the bottom of what his campaign may or may not have done with Russia.
Just finally, Congressman Stewart, do you have confidence in Director Wray that he's going to right the wrongs that took place?
I do, and unlike Director Comey, he seems to be much less interested in his public perception than he is in actually managing and leading the FBI. As you said earlier, we don't see him much before the cameras. He seems to be someone who wants to work behind the scenes, and I believe that he's sincere in his comments today. We can do better than this. We're going to do better. I think the American people should take some relief in that. And by the way, the good news is he's united Republicans and Democrats. We both are frustrated with some of the decisions that he's made.
Yeah. Congressman Stewart, Robbie Mook, I appreciate both your times. Thanks so much. Just ahead, James Comey has already responded to the Inspector General's report. We'll tell you what he has to say for himself. And later, a contentious back and forth in the White House briefing room today over the Trump administration's separation of children from their parents who crossed the U.S.-Mexico border illegally.
Been putting off buying new glasses? Zenni Optical offers a huge variety of high-quality, stylish frames and state-of-the-art optics, starting at just $6.95. We've got all the great frame styles you want in materials like titanium, carbon fiber, and high-luster acetate. Plus, Zenni offers prescription glasses and sunglasses. So at this great price, you can build your eyewear wardrobe. You can get 10% off your entire order with code 360. So visit Zenni, Zenni, today at zennioptical.com and use code 360.
Turning to our breaking news, the Justice Department's Inspector General saying that former FBI Director James Comey did not follow department procedures when he announced that reopening of the FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server. Now, that report also says there was no political bias in Comey's actions. Not surprisingly, James Comey tonight is disagreeing with some of the conclusions that were reached. In an op-ed posted by the New York Times, the former FBI director says, and I quote, "Nothing in the Inspector General's report makes me think we did the wrong thing," unquote. He continued, "My team believed the damage of concealing the reopening of our investigation would have been catastrophic to the institution. The Inspector General weighs it differently, and that's okay, even though I respectfully disagree." Joining me now is Jeffrey Toobin, Gloria Borger, and Phil Mudd. I mean, Gloria, this administration initially said that Comey was fired over the handling of the Clinton email investigation. Yep. Giuliani, the president's personal attorney, repeated that recently. But the president obviously said he fired Comey for quote, the Russia thing to Lester Holt. How does this play into the overall Russia investigation?
Well, first of all, I think that Lester Holt interview is going to become more and more important in this investigation. But the president's attorneys were meeting in Washington today, and I'm told that this subject came up. And I think what Robbie Mook was talking about and said he feared is going to be one of their arguments against the special counsel, which is, look at what the Inspector General said. We were right to fire James Comey. You can't say it's because of obstruction. And also there's something else they're likely to use in the report today, which is that there was a visceral bias at the outset of the Russia investigation from people like Peter Strzok, who was in the early stages of the Russia investigation, and they will therefore claim that it's completely tainted from the outset.
Jeff, I mean, you know, the IG report did say that they couldn't determine whether bias played a role in Peter Strzok's decision to prioritize the Russia investigation over the investigation to Anthony Weiner's emails.
Well, you know, Peter Strzok's emails are really bad. They are really bad for the FBI. You know, I am familiar with how FBI investigations work. Even though he was a high-ranking FBI official, he had no authority over this case. He didn't decide whether this case went forward or not. But I can't blame the Trump people for being upset about that. I mean, they are very upsetting emails. I think in the broader context, they are probably not influential in how this whole story unfolded. There are lots of layers involved here. But and certainly compared to Comey's decision to reopen the investigation on the eve of the election, I think that the is far more important. But it was a bad set of emails. It's a bad sentiment for any investigator to express or feel. And I don't blame the Trump people for calling a lot of attention to it.
Mm-hmm. Phil, I mean, as someone who used to work at the FBI, knows the institution well, I'm wondering what you took away from this report.
Boy, dodged bullet. I looked at this in the previous year of conversations we've had about the text, and we knew a lot about the text messages between Strzok and his lover. We knew about the other elements that were in this investigation, questions about the appropriateness of James Comey's activities. I looked at this and said, today, the other shoe is going to fall. The Inspector General, who was viewed when I was at the FBI as a sledgehammer, the Inspectors General never hold back, is going to come back and say, we saw all this bias among individuals like Peter Strzok, and we saw that reflected in the investigation. The Inspector General came back. I kept looking for it in the summary today and said, actually, we didn't see this reflecting the investigation. I think they dodged a bullet today. It could have been much, much worse.
Well, Jeff, I mean, Chris Wray, the FBI director, said that he cares about the opinions of, quote, the people who actually really know us and know us through our work. He named juries, judges, victims, law enforcement personnel. Absent there was the president, who has obviously attacked the FBI. I don't know if one can read too much into that, or do you think that was intentional? Was it a dig against the president?
I think it was a very mild dig. I mean, Chris Wray doesn't want to wind up like James Comey. He doesn't want to get fired as well. But I know FBI agents. I've worked with FBI agents. I mean, there is a considerable amount of resentment against the president for dismissing the whole bureau because he doesn't like the Russia investigation. And Wray has to walk that line, defend the bureau, and protect himself with his boss. And I think that line was an extremely gentle way of differentiating himself from the president, but it was hardly an attack on Donald Trump.
Gloria, I mean, the report, obviously, as we talked about, found that Comey was using or did use his personal email, a Gmail account, for official business, all while he's investigating Hillary Clinton and criticizing her for also doing that. Obviously, irony for Democrats here is pretty rich.
Yeah, irony is not dead. And, when we all read that line in the report today, we went, really? I mean, obviously you could say, and Comey would say, I wasn't using my Gmail account for classified information, so maybe that's the difference. But I think if you're a former Hillary Clinton advisor, you'd be saying, wait a minute. He went out there and said that Hillary Clinton was extremely careless about her personal email account being used for State Department business, and here he was doing the same thing. I mean, that's pretty rich.
Phil, I mean, even though the report, as we talked about, found the political bias didn't affect the outcome of the investigation, it did find evidence of political bias amongst FBI agents, which certainly does feed into people's, skepticism, and certainly supporters of the president and the president's skepticism of the FBI as a whole. Chris Wray pointed out, there's tens of thousands of FBI employees. Do you think Wray is taking this seriously enough in terms of the changes he says, that he accepts that were recommended in this report?
Oh, heck yes. How many? I mean, I had an FBI-issued BlackBerry back when we had BlackBerries. Can you imagine how many people with a BlackBerry or smartphone at the FBI today are exchanging messages of a personal nature on their FBI? He doesn't even have to do training. Nobody's going to do that. But let's be clear for a moment here, Anderson, about what's going on. This is not about inappropriate text messages. 150 or 200 million Americans either hated Hillary Clinton or hated Donald Trump, and they talked about it over Thanksgiving dinner, over text messages at sporting events, and while they're fishing for bass. The mistake here was that two individuals used a government-provided phone to communicate this way. You think 35,000 FBI people don't have views on Trump or Clinton? I was there. We had views on that. You just wouldn't talk about it at work. So let's be clear. You cannot anticipate that people involved in an investigation don't have a view. They need to separate it from work, and they can never use a work computer or cell phone to talk about it. That's the problem here.
All right, Jeff, Gloria, Phil, thanks. Coming up next, the heartache of families being separated at the border. The administration says it is only following a law, and there's a reason for it. The question is, what do the facts and the history say? Keeping them honest. Ahead.
The right sheets can take your sleep and your style to the next level. With Boll & Branch, the upgrade has never been more affordable. Every set is crafted from 100% organic cotton. They get softer and softer over time. That's why they have thousands of 5-star reviews, and even 3 U.S. presidents have Boll & Branch sheets. Try them for 30 nights, and if you don't love them, send them back for a full refund. Go to bollandbranch.com today for $50 off your first set of sheets, plus free U.S. shipping with promo code CNN2. Spelled B-O-L-L and branch.com. That's bollandbranch.com, promo code CNN2.
The Trump administration today fired back at critics of its immigration policy, which, as you know, has separated hundreds of children from their parents. According to White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, there's no choice in the matter, only the letter of the law.
Because it's the law, and that's what the law states. It's a moral policy to follow and enforce the law. And these laws are the same that have been on the books for over a decade, and the president is simply enforcing them. Again, the laws are the ones that have been on the books for over a decade, and the president is enforcing them. It's not a policy change to enforce the law. Our administration has had the same position since we started on day one that we were going to enforce the law. We're a country of law and order, and we're enforcing the law and protecting our borders.
Well, also today, responding to criticism from U.S. Catholic bishops, Attorney General Sessions invoked the Bible in his defense.
I would cite you to the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government because God has ordained the government for his purposes.
Well, keeping them honest, though, however you interpret Scripture, there's nothing on the federal books requiring family separation. There is, however, a law making illegal border crossing a misdemeanor, which this administration is choosing to enforce with no exceptions. They're now charging those who cross illegally in federal criminal court instead of processing them administratively in immigration court, as had been done in the past. It's a key difference because it means the parents are now placed in jail. Their kids are taken away from them and placed in federal shelters. Now, prior to this, during the Bush and Obama administrations, adults with children were generally released from custody pending disposition of their cases. That changed last month, and if you're thinking that separating families was somehow unexpected fallout, you'd be mistaken. Listen to the Attorney General announcing the new policy last month.
If you cross the border unlawfully, even a first offense, then we're going to prosecute you. If you smuggle an illegal alien across the border, then we'll prosecute you for smuggling. If you're smuggling a child, then we're going to prosecute you. And that child will be separated from you, probably, as required by law. If you don't want your child to be separated, then don't bring him across the border illegally.
So the administration saw this coming, but are now blaming it on a law that they, and they alone, chose to enforce in a new way with zero tolerance. Now, you can agree or disagree with the policy. That's a policy matter, but you can't simply blame it on pre-existing law. Now, supporters of the policy say long-term it's going to deter parents from endangering their kids by coming to the U.S. illegally. And some top officials as far back as March were telling CNN that separating kids from adults was a feature of the administration's policy, not just an accidental result. Quote, we're trying to find ways to deter the use of children in illegal immigration, a senior Homeland Security official told us back then. This official framed it as a way of deterring child smuggling by non-parents, but he was unable to say how border agents could determine family relationships. Our Ed Lavandera has been reporting the story from the border. He joins us tonight from McAllen, Texas. So part of your team was able to get inside one of these detention centers housing separated kids. What did they find?
Well, you know, it was kind of a strange, surreal experience, to be honest. You know, just overall, this is one of the 100 facilities across 17 states that is housing thousands of undocumented immigrant children, many of them who have been separated from their families here over the course of the last month. Look, from what we saw and our colleagues saw inside that, It was a clean place, very sterile. But there was a strangeness to it. This particular unit was a 250,000 square foot old Walmart that had been converted essentially into this detention center. The children have rooms where the 5 kids sleep to a room. They have recreation abilities. There's recreational fields, pool tables, and that sort of thing. But when you kind of take all that into account, Anderson, it is still a strange feeling when you're walking around there.
How consistent is the zero tolerance policy being applied to people crossing over?
All of this seems to be applied very arbitrarily. That as the administration talks about this zero tolerance policy, and that everyone is going to be prosecuted for this illegal entry. What we have found in a number of places here along the border is that it's much more haphazard. Literally across the street from the federal courthouse here in McAllen, where hundreds of undocumented immigrants have been brought into a courtroom here over the last month or so, there is a shelter that caters to immigrants who have been released. It's a place for them to grab some food, take a shower, clean up, and wait for their bus ticket out of town. And in there, we've talked to people who say they haven't been arrested, they haven't been taken to federal court, and they haven't been separated from their children.
Ed Levender, appreciate it in McAllen tonight. Thanks very much. Up next, President Trump and his 3 oldest children are sued by the New York Attorney General, who's accused them of using the Trump Foundation to benefit his run for office and even settle legal claims against businesses owned by the president.
Hey, it's Howard Beck, and I've got Marcus Thompson of The Athletic on Bleacher Report's The Full 48.
Kevin Durant was incredible. For 3 straight games, He was insanely good in all facets of the game. And in the end, he says, I can't do this without Steph. I guarantee you that matters more to Steph than the Finals MVP.
So check out The Full 48 now on the Bleacher Report app or subscribe at Apple Podcasts.
President Trump is facing a new lawsuit tonight, and this one involves his family. New York's Attorney General is suing the president and his 3 oldest children, Don Jr., Ivanka, and Eric, alleging that they repeatedly and illegally used the Trump Foundation charity to benefit personal and business interests, including the 2016 presidential campaign. The Attorney General accuses them of using foundation money in several transactions, among them $100,000 to settle legal claims against Mar-a-Lago, $158,000 to settle legal claims against Trump National Golf Club, and $10,000 from the foundation to purchase this painting of Donald Trump, which was displayed at Trump National Doral Golf Course. The nearly 2-year investigation was started under the previous Attorney General, and the president went after him today on Twitter. Quote, the sleazy New York Democrats and their now disgraced and run out of town AG, Eric Schneiderman, are doing everything they can to sue me on a foundation that took in $18,800,000 and gave out to charity more money than it took in, $19,200,000. I won't settle this case. Mr. Schneiderman resigned last month after the New Yorker reported allegations of physical assault by multiple women. He's denied those allegations. The new Attorney General said today there is nothing sleazy or political about the lawsuit. Joining me tonight for his take on all this, Preet Bharara, the former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York and a CNN senior legal analyst. Just in terms of the law, what could this mean for President Trump, this investigation of the foundation?
Well, it's another legal headache on top of a whole bunch of other legal headaches that are directed at some of his associates, including Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort and others. The thing that struck me in reading the verified petition is that repeatedly in the petition, the New York AG's office makes the point of saying that Donald Trump himself, not delegated to someone else, but himself, signed documents under penalty of perjury. Made representations about the way that the foundation was run.
Right, said that it wasn't involved in politics.
Correct, and then it looks like it was, with very specific, concrete allegations. And so, at this point, people need to remember this is not a criminal case that has been brought, it's a civil case. When you bring a civil case, it's sort of at the beginning. They've done some investigation, obviously, because they have a lot of information and details in the lawsuit document. But they get discovery over time unless it gets dismissed. And when you get more evidence, sometimes in connection with a civil suit, depending on what the evidence tells you, there's a possibility, I don't want to get ahead of the game, but there's a possibility of a criminal charge. Perjury is not an unserious thing.
So if there was to be a criminal charge, it would be a perjury charge?
I'm just saying that's one example. That's the thing that leapt out at me. To prove something like that, you have to show what was in the person's mind.
Right.
There was not a mistake. It was not negligence. It was not something else. But it is significant that unlike so many other things that we've been reading about with respect to the president's legal troubles that were done at the behest of the president, and so we don't know what's in the president's mind, these certifications were made personally by the president, and that point is made repeatedly in the document.
But if it remains just a civil matter, it's basically talking about a potential fine.
Yeah, I mean, they're seeking, I think, $2.8 million, right? So right now, it's a legal headache that's going to expose a lot of things. It's causing people like you and others in the press to focus on the way that the foundation was run. There's some parallels to the way the foundation was run to how he runs the pardon process and many other things. There are no employees. There are no standards. There was no board of directors that had met in 19 years. I think the allegation is specifically that the president, who was the head of the board of directors, ran the foundation on whim as opposed to on the basis of law.
His kids were on the board for a time. He was sort of making that a selling point about the foundation, saying there was no overhead, which, some foundations do have a lot of overhead. The flip side of that is the reason you have a board and the reason you hire attorneys.
So you don't break the law.
Right.
People like to malign lawyers, but they do help you stay in the straight and narrow. But more importantly than that, it looked like the president was just using the foundation, as alleged in the document, to pay off other legal debts by funneling money to other charities. And so it looks like it's coming within the rubric of the law, but it looked like it was a sham.
And it also looked like he was donating all this money when sometimes the money was coming from other people directly to his foundation.
It was a show of charity masked by a foundation that wasn't living up to what the law requires a foundation to live up to, if you believe the allegations in the complaint. And more seriously, as everyone knows, foundations like the ones, like the Trump Foundation, that are constituted under particular laws, under the tax laws and local state laws, are not supposed to engage in politics. And, in allegation after allegation after allegation, the point is made that it was basically run during the 2016 campaign, by the people on Donald Trump's campaign. They were directing where events would take place. They were directing how the events would take place. They were directing where the money was going to go.
Corey Lewandowski saying, could you basically donate some money in a particular state?
And you're supposed to keep those things separate. And here, clearly, I don't see how you defend against at least that allegation. Clearly, they were not kept separate.
The Trump Organization has said that basically politics are involved in this. They say it's politics at its very worst from the Attorney General's office. Do you see politics involved in this? Because obviously the president has been very critical of the former Attorney General.
Yeah.
This is now his replacement.
Yeah, I mean, the point I make about that is Barbara Underwood is a career lawyer, former Solicitor General for the state of New York. I don't even know what her politics are. She's not running for the office in the fall. She's well respected by all sides, and she took over the investigation in the case, and I believe her and credit what she says when she says she brought it, because it's in the interest of justice to do so. And the problem is, when someone is in political office, if you can always use the argument that because I'm in political office and someone else is bringing a case against us and it's political, you don't get a get out of jail free card because of that. That doesn't consign immunity upon you.
I got to ask you, the New York Times said that you recently registered as a Democrat for the first time in quite a while. It's obviously continued to raise speculation that you may run for the office of Attorney General. Have you made any decision?
I have not.
Anything else you want to say about that?
I do not.
That's what I figured. Preet Bharara, thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, time now to check in with Chris Quellman to see what his team are working on for their program, starting in just a few minutes. Chris?
All right, first we're going to tackle the heart, then we're going to tackle the head. Does God really want the law enforced the way it's being done by the government on the border right now? Families separated, children sometimes taken from mothers, kept in conditions that certainly suggest we can do better. We're going to look at that, and then we're going to look at the good facts and the bad facts in the IG report. Now, we both know, Anderson, that facts aren't good or bad, but they are when you apply them to politics, and partisans are seeing what they want to in this IG report. So we'll show what the facts and conclusions suggest.
All right, I'll be watching, Chris. Thanks very much. A lot more ahead tonight, including reaction to the salute President Trump gave to that North Korean general while at the Singapore summit. Details ahead.
Hey, it's Alicia Malone. I am the host of the Filmstruck podcast, an audio playground for lovers of cinema, both past and present. On the newest episode, I sit down with Morgan Neville to talk about his new film, Won't You Be My Neighbor, about the beloved television personality, Mr. Rogers.
Love is a noun like struggle. That these are things you have to fight for, and he fought for kindness.
Take tissues to see this movie and subscribe to hear more wherever you get your podcasts. Bye!
North Korean state television today broadcast some images of the Singapore summit that we hadn't seen before. President Trump is seen returning a salute from a North Korean general with the smiling Kim Jong-un in the background. Press Secretary Sarah Sanders today called it a common courtesy. However, a U.S. official told CNN that the president was briefed on protocol, which is to not salute military officers from other countries, particularly a country like North Korea. Meantime, reaction to what actually was agreed upon at the summit continues to come in. We're joined by Ambassador Richard Haass, author of the book A World in Disarray, American Foreign Policy and the Crisis of the Old Order. Ambassador, as you know, the president tweeted, quote, everybody can now feel much safer than the day I took office. There's no longer a nuclear threat from North Korea. Can the president actually say there's no longer a threat from North Korea, a nuclear threat?
Well, he can say it, and he did. It just has the problem that it's not accurate. That's a goal, but in no way it's reality. And what happened or didn't happen in Singapore did nothing to eliminate the nuclear or missile threat coming from North Korea.
When you say it did nothing, I mean, is that fair? Because, I mean, the president and his supporters obviously say, well, look, at least, the two sides are talking, and talking is better than the alternative.
Well, I don't argue that. But again, what all talking is and all the agreement was aspirational. The real question is now, what, if anything, happens? Look, Anderson, I'd love nothing more than to come on your show in 6 months or a year or 2 years and say that Singapore was the first step of what turned out to be a diplomatic success. And we can point to a North Korea that's dramatically reduced or eliminated its nuclear capabilities, its missile capabilities. We've had the access we need to verify that they've done all that. That would be fantastic. All I'm saying is all of that remains to be done.
The language in the joint statement was that North Korea, quote, commits to work toward complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and that Kim Jong-un, quote, reaffirmed his firm and unwavering commitment to complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. The idea of working towards something is very different than actually pledging complete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization.
Absolutely, and there's nothing in the agreement that defines denuclearization, how extensive is meant by that. It doesn't mention the missiles. You can't verify anything unless you first have all the details of what it is you have. People need to understand that verification doesn't mean you go searching around the country with a flashlight and a magnifying glass looking for things. It means you have a comprehensive, accurate inventory of everything that's relevant, and you go in to basically corroborate it.
There's the argument that, look, it hasn't worked in the past. All the things that U.S. and various administrations, Republican and Democrat, have tried haven't worked. Perhaps this kind of top-down approach where rather than having bilateral meetings or multi-country meetings initially, having the two leaders meet right off the get-go, that might actually kind of break the logjam.
Like from your mouth to God's ear. And I would love that to be so. I think everyone ought to hope that this happens, but to simply base it all on trust and on a personal relationship seems to me extraordinarily optimistic, to say the least. To commit to working towards something without a timeline and without a definition doesn't seem to me to accomplish a whole lot. Mike Pompeo essentially has all the work cut out for him.
Yeah, a lot of work, certainly. I want to ask you about President Trump's salute to the North Korean general. Sarah Sanders was asked about it today. It called it a common courtesy. Do you see a problem with it? I mean, President Obama was certainly criticized for, sort of bowing to in Saudi Arabia, also to the Emperor of Japan.
It's not something I would have recommended had I been staffing the President of the United States. Not something I would personally do, given everything from his position to the nature of the North Korean military. But given what we've just been talking about, I would say that symbolic choice he made, which again I think is probably not ideal, that pales in comparison to the significance of the issues you and I have just been talking about.
I also want to ask you about the president's comments on Kim Jong-un and human rights abuses. He did say that Kim has done some terrible things. He also said that he's, quote, a tough guy. He praised him for saying, very few people could have done what he did in terms of coming into power at age 26 and ruling things toughly in the way that he did, and that, a lot of other people have done really bad things. Is that an argument of moral equivalence, which is, again, what President Obama used to be criticized for?
Pretty much. And it seemed to me almost slightly admiring of what Kim Jong-un has done over the years. So I can understand why, say, human rights were not part of the agreement. Agreements don't have to cover everything under the sun. It would be more than enough, shall we say, to succeed in dealing with the nuclear and missile challenge. But I didn't understand those words. Clearly, the president, though, is making an investment in Kim Jong-un. Clearly, he believes, Anderson, that flattery and personal relationships and chemistry somehow hold the key to what's going to happen here. I, for one, am dubious of that, to say the least. I believe leaders reflect their national interests, are constrained by their own politics. So I don't believe charm, flattery, and the like is going to work here. But the president has his way of doing business. I hope he's right, but I'm profoundly skeptical.
No. Ambassador Haas, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, when we continue, the annual congressional baseball game is underway in Washington tonight, especially poignant because it comes on the one-year anniversary of the shooting during the Republican practice for the game.
From Chaplin to Aronofsky and The Thin Man to Magnolia, Filmstruck is the ultimate movie streaming service for fans of great cinema. This summer, enjoy collections from master directors like David Lean, Oliver Stone, and Yasujiro Ozu. And modern favorites like Before Sunrise and Reservoir Dogs. Plus, exclusive interviews and commentary from the Criterion Collection and Turner Classic Movies. Filmstruck, all the greats. For a free 14-day trial, visit filmstruck.com.
The annual congressional baseball game is being played tonight in Washington. It's a tradition between Republicans and Democrats, and for one night anyway, partisan differences are supposed to vanish. This year's game, of course, has special poignancy. It's being played on the first anniversary of the shooting a year ago in suburban Virginia, where Republican members of the team were practicing. Of course, Louisiana Republican Congressman Steve Scalise was seriously wounded. He was among 4 people who were shot when a man opened fire during the practice. Tonight, just before the game, Scalise tweeted a picture of himself in uniform. There's the picture. His Twitter message read, "I'm back in the game." Once the game started, a special moment, Scalise recorded the first out, and there were hugs all around.
The entire infield, the entire field goes over to congratulate him and give him a big hug. How about that? For the very first
really a great moment for the congressman and everyone there. We're glad he's back. Thanks for watching 360. Time now to hand it over to Chris Cuomo with Cuomo Prime Time. Chris?
Hey. Before you go, we wanted to let you know that we just launched the ability for anyone to advertise on CNN Podcasts. You're just a few clicks away from reaching millions of people in a way that you never have before. Advertise for a business, event, or kick off an awareness campaign for your brand. Start today at purewinning.com/CNN. Integrating podcasts into your marketing mix has never been easier. Go to purewinning.com/CNN to get started.